Sorry, Michael, but we've decided to exclude you from the will. Dad always said you were the unsuccessful one. My sister's words hit like a punch to the gut. My own father had written me out of his will, 40 years of being the dutiful son, and this was my reward. I stood in the lawyer's office, surrounded by my siblings. They avoided eye contact. Embarrassed, guilty, probably just uncomfortable. Death makes people awkward. The lawyer, Mr. Finch, cleared his throat. Shall we proceed with the reading? I nodded and took a seat in the corner, the farthest chair from the family I thought I belonged to. My name is Michael Harrington. For most of my life, I've been the invisible middle child. Not the brilliant firstborn like my brother James, not the beautiful baby of the family like my sister Eliza. Just Michael, reliable Michael, boring Michael, unsuccessful Michael. At least according to my father, Dad built Harrington Construction from nothing. A self-made millionaire who never let anyone forget it. He wanted his children to follow in his footsteps. James did, becoming a hotshot real estate developer. Eliza became a celebrated architect whose designs won awards. And me? I worked for the same company for 20 years. Steady job, modest home, nothing flashy. Nothing worthy of my father's respect, apparently. Mr. Finch adjusted his glasses. The estate of Harold Harrington, valued at approximately $4.2 million, including property and investments, is to be divided as follows. I half listened as he detailed how my father's fortune would be split between James, Eliza, and several cousins. Even my father's golf buddy got a vintage watch collection worth more than my car. My name never came up. There is a note here, Mr. Finch said, regarding Michael Harrington. The room went silent. My sister shifted uncomfortably. It says, "To my son Michael, I leave my regrets that you never showed the ambition or success worthy of the Harrington name. Perhaps this will motivate you to finally make something of yourself." The words hung in the air like poison. James coughed. Mike, I'm sorry. We didn't know he'd put that in writing. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Mr. Finch, before we conclude, I have something to add to the record. The lawyer looked confused. This isn't really a form for statements, Mr. Harrington. It's relevant to the estate, I said. You see, there's a company called Horizon Investments. It's a holding company that owns a 51% controlling interest in Harrington Construction. James frowned. What are you talking about? Dad owned Harrington outright. I smiled for the first time that day. Not for the past 8 years, he hasn't. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. These are the incorporation documents for Horizon Investments, founded by me 15 years ago. And these are the purchase agreements, signed by Dad himself, selling controlling interest to Horizon. The room erupted. James was on his feet, shouting. Eliza was pale, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the armrests of her chair. That's impossible, James sputtered. Dad would never sell the company. He didn't know he was selling it to me, I said quietly. Horizon Investments was just a name on paper to him. A corporate entity with excellent credit and promising prospects. I made sure of that. Mr. Finch was examining the documents with wide eyes. These appear legitimate, but why would your father sell controlling interest? Because he needed cash 8 years ago. The 2008 crash hit him harder than anyone knew. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy. I offered financing through Horizon, my investment firm that I'd been building on the side for years. Dad took the deal. I turned to my siblings. While you two were winning awards and buying vacation homes, I was working 80-hour weeks building my own business. Dad never bothered to ask what I actually did at that boring job of mine. James looked like he might be sick. So you own Harrington Construction, the company Dad built? 51% of it, and as the new controlling shareholder, I'll be making some changes. The silence in the room was deafening. Starting with the executive team, I continued. James, your position as VP of Development is being eliminated effective immediately. My brother's face went from shocked to furious in an instant. You can't do that. I've run that division for a decade. Into the ground, I corrected. You've approved projects that lost millions while rejecting profitable ones that didn't have enough prestige. Dad covered for you because you were his golden boy. That ends today. I turned to my sister. Eliza, Harrington will no longer be contracting with your architecture firm. Your designs are beautiful, but consistently run 30% over budget. We can't afford your artistry anymore. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Michael, this is cruel. Dad's not even cold in his grave. Cruel? I laughed. Cruel is telling your son he's worthless for 40 years. Cruel is excluding him from your will with a note about how disappointing he is. I walked to the door, but paused with my hand on the knob. There will be a shareholders meeting on Monday. As the majority owner, I'll be taking my rightful place as CEO. You're all welcome to attend. I left them sitting there, mouths open, worlds shattered. Outside, the spring air felt clean in my lungs. For the first time in decades, I felt visible, powerful, free. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Sarah. How did it go? I smiled and typed back, exactly as planned. I'll tell you everything over dinner. The next few days were chaos. James tried to challenge the legitimacy of Horizon's purchase. Eliza called mutual friends to paint me as a villain. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. But the documents were ironclad. I'd spent years making sure of that. Monday morning arrived with a brilliant sunrise. I put on my best suit, nothing flashy, just well-made and perfectly tailored. Sarah straightened my tie and kissed me. Show them who you really are, she whispered. The Harrington Construction headquarters was a 12-story building downtown. I'd been there countless times over the years, always as Michael, the CEO's unremarkable son. Today, I walked in as the owner. The receptionist did a double take when I asked to be directed to the boardroom. Mr. Harrington? Of course, right away. The boardroom was packed. The executive team, the board members, my siblings, even some curious employees had squeezed in. All eyes turned to me as I entered. James sat in our father's chair at the head of the table. A deliberate move staking his claim. You're in my seat, I said quietly. This is Dad's chair, he replied. I'm the eldest son. And I'm the majority shareholder. Move. After a tense moment, he slid to an adjacent seat. I took my place and looked around the table. For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Harrington. As of my father's passing, I control 51% of this company through my firm, Horizon Investments. I'll be serving as CEO effective immediately. The room erupted with questions. I held up a hand. I know this comes as a shock. My father cultivated the image that James was his successor. But Harold Harrington made a business decision 8 years ago that changed the future of this company. I opened my laptop and projected a chart onto the wall screen. It showed Harrington Construction's financial performance over the past decade. This red section represents the company's performance under my brother's and father's leadership. The green section shows the improvements after Horizon's intervention. We've increased profitability by 42% while reducing overhead by 18%. James scoffed. Anyone can make a pretty chart. You've been manipulating Dad for years, plotting behind our backs. I turned to him calmly. I saved this company when you were too busy building that ridiculous vacation home in Aspen. While you were taking clients to 5-star restaurants, I was working with our project managers to streamline operations. Dad would never have wanted this, Eliza interjected. Dad wanted success, I replied, and I delivered it while you two were trading on the family name. One of the board members, Mrs. Chen, leaned forward. What are your plans for the company, Mr. Harrington? I smiled. This was the question I'd been waiting for. Harrington Construction has been coasting on my father's reputation for too long. We've been taking safe, prestigious projects while ignoring opportunities for growth. That ends now. I clicked to the next slide showing a map of the city with several locations highlighted. These are affordable housing projects that we've passed on in the past 5 years. We're going to bid on them now. We're also going to establish an apprenticeship program for at-risk youth to learn construction trades. The room was silent. This wasn't what anyone expected. But those projects have thin margins, James protested. They have steady margins, I corrected, and they build communities instead of just monuments to wealth. Dad forgot that somewhere along the way. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for the company. Sustainable building practices, employee profit sharing, community investment. All the ideas my father had dismissed as bleeding heart nonsense. By the end, the energy in the room had shifted. The executives were taking notes. Board members were nodding. Even some of the employees looked cautiously optimistic. James and Eliza sat stone-faced. "One last thing," I said. "James, Eliza, I'm offering you both positions in the new organization structure." They looked up in surprise. "James, your connections in commercial real estate are valuable. I'm offering you a role as Director of Client Relations. No management responsibilities, but you'll be the face clients see." He started to protest, but I continued. "Eliza, your designs are beautiful but impractical. I'm creating a new sustainability design unit. You can lead it if you're willing to work within budget constraints." "Why would we work for you after what you've done?" Eliza asked. "Because it's a chance to be part of something meaningful," I replied. "And because your alternatives are limited. Your personal finances aren't as solid as you pretend." Their shocked expressions confirmed my intelligence was accurate. "Think about it. You have until the end of the week to decide." I closed the meeting and walked out, ignoring the buzz of conversation that erupted behind me. My assistant, newly assigned that morning, hurried alongside me. "Your office is ready, Mr. Harrington, and your wife called. She said to remind you about dinner with the Thompsons tonight." "Thank you, Jennifer. Could you also schedule individual meetings with each department head for tomorrow? I want to hear their assessments directly." "Already on your calendar, sir." I smiled. This was going to work. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I implemented changes rapidly before resistance could organize. Some executives resigned in protest. Others embraced the new direction enthusiastically. To everyone's surprise, James accepted the position I offered. His pride was wounded, but his bank account needed the salary. Eliza declined initially, but called 3 weeks later asking if the offer was still open. It was. The most difficult moment came when I cleaned out my father's office. Among his papers, I found a journal. Against my better judgment, I read it. Most entries were about business deals or complaints about employees, but one page caught my eye. Michael visited today, quiet as always. He asked about the Anderson project's financing. Always interested in the money, never the vision. Sometimes I wonder if he's really my son. No fire in him, no ambition. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Even in his private thoughts, he'd misunderstood me completely. 3 months after taking control, I invited my siblings to dinner at my home. Not the modest house they'd visited before, but my real home. A renovated farmhouse on 10 acres outside the city. The home I'd kept secret because I didn't want to answer questions about how a company man could afford it. They arrived together, clearly having coordinated beforehand. Sarah greeted them warmly, ever the perfect hostess despite her private misgivings. "This is unexpected," James said, looking around at the spacious living room with its exposed beams and wall of windows overlooking the property. "Most of my life has been unexpected for you," I replied. "Come sit down. Dinner's almost ready." Over a meal of Sarah's famous lasagna, we talked about the company. The conversation was stilted at first, but gradually became more natural as we discussed projects and personnel. "The Bennett Tower is ahead of schedule," Eliza admitted. "Your project manager is actually listening to my sustainability recommendations." "Because you're staying within budget," I pointed out. "That was always the issue, not your ideas themselves." James swirled his wine. "The Robinson account is happy with the revised proposal. They appreciated the personal touch." "You've always been good with clients," I acknowledged, "when you focus on their needs rather than impressing them." After dinner, I led them to my home office. Unlike our father's mahogany-paneled shrine to himself, my workspace was simple. One wall was covered with photos, family vacations, Sarah and me on our wedding day, the cabin we built together in the mountains. "Why are you showing us this?" Eliza asked. I pointed to a framed document on the wall. "That's the first investment I ever made. $5,000 in a friend's startup when I was 22. It paid off tenfold." I pointed to another frame. "That's the deed to my first rental property. And that's the incorporation papers for Horizon." "You've been planning this for decades," James said accusingly. "I've been building something for decades," I corrected. "Not to take revenge, not even to prove Dad wrong, but because I saw opportunities that everyone else missed." I sat down behind my desk. "I didn't invite you here to gloat. I invited you because despite everything, we're family. and I'm offering you a genuine partnership in the new Harrington construction. What does that mean exactly? James asked cautiously. It means I'm creating a new corporate structure. 3 divisions, each with its own president. James, you'd lead client acquisition, Eliza, sustainable design, and I'll handle operations and finance. Why would you share power after going to such lengths to take it? Eliza asked. Because I never wanted power for its own sake. I wanted to fix what was broken. And now that I have your attention, I think we can do more together than apart. They exchanged glances, communicating silently as they had since childhood. We'd need to see the details, James said finally. Of course, the lawyers are drawing up the paperwork now, but there's one non-negotiable condition. What's that? They asked in unison. 20% of our profits will go to a foundation in Dad's name, for educational scholarships and community development in the neighborhoods where we build. He forgot where he came from. We won't make the same mistake. To my surprise, they both nodded immediately. Dad would have hated that, James said with a small smile, which probably means it's the right thing to do. 6 months later, we held a ceremony to break ground on our first major affordable housing project, the Harrington Foundation's first initiative. Local news covered the event. James handled the press with his usual charm. Eliza proudly showed off the sustainable design features, and I stood in the background, watching our employees engage with community members. A reporter eventually cornered me. Mr. Harrington, this is quite a change in direction for your family's company. What would your father think of this project? I thought about it for a moment. My father believed in building things that last. In his own way, he wanted to leave a legacy. This project honors that intention, even if the execution is different than he might have chosen. And what about the rumors that you secretly bought the company from under your father's nose years ago? I smiled. Family businesses are complicated. Let's just say that my father and I had different definitions of success. In the end, I think we're building something he would be proud of. Later that evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. I placed a single blueprint on the headstone, the plans for the affordable housing complex bearing his name. You never saw me, Dad, I said quietly. You looked right through me for 40 years, but I saw everything. I learned from your successes and your mistakes. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead. I'm not doing this to spite you. I'm doing it because it's right. Because the Harrington name should stand for more than just profit. I stood there for a long time, remembering the man who had shaped me. Sometimes through love, often through neglect, always through example. As the sun set, I turned to leave. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Board approved the apprenticeship program unanimously. We're all set for next quarter. I smiled and typed back, Perfect. Heading home now. The future starts tomorrow. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of being the unsuccessful son had finally lifted. In its place was something better than vindication. Purpose. My father had built a company. I was building a legacy. And for the first time in my life, I was completely visible.